Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. It is the last day of National Nutrition Month, and we're glad that you could join us today. My name is Becca Rick, and I'm the director of our Health and Wellness Consulting team at GBS. So for those of you who don't know, GBS is a benefits consulting firm where we work with thousands of companies on their employee benefit offerings. So for today's webinar, we're focused on this year's National Nutrition Month theme, which is celebrating a world of flavors. And it just so happens to pair perfectly with our GBS Wellness focus this year on blue zones and highlighting just various foods from around the world. I am now going to pass over the time to our presenter, Sephel, who is finishing her master's program in nutrition here in a month. And we're fortunate to have her interning with our team this year. So she's going to walk us through her slides, and we should have a few minutes at the end to take questions. Feel free to type your questions in the Q&A feature on the bottom panel just as we go, and we'll address as many as time allows at the end.
All right, thanks, Becca, and hi, everybody. So like Becca said, I'm at the University of Utah, and just a little background, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee originally, but I've been here in Utah for a decade now. And when I wrap up this nutrition program at the University of Utah, my goal is to work in community nutrition, working with clients to help them understand how nutrition can help them prevent and manage chronic diseases. So that's kind of my goal here after I take the registered dietitian examination. And like Becca said, it really pairs well with our theme, National Nutrition Month. Oops. There we go. So we'll talk a little bit about what National Nutrition Month is and kind of why I've paired it with the Blue Zones. We'll go into what the Blue Zones have shared with us about lifestyle practices and food guidelines and living long, healthy lives. And then we'll look at MyPlate and some cultural considerations. And then we'll look at SMART goals and really make it applicable to your everyday life. So National Nutrition Month, like Becca said, is this is the last day of it, but it's every March. And this year's theme is to celebrate a world of flavors. And the goal is to really shine a light on the National Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is the credentialing company or academy, I should say, for registered dietitians, and really showing what registered dietitians can do for you, as well as for dietitians in the community. It's a support system that's both professional and public, and they can help you learn how to make informed food choices and develop healthful eating and physical activity goals. So keeping that in mind, we'll kind of circle back around to how a dietitian can really help you kind of at the end of the presentation, and we'll give you some resources with the Academy. But I really was excited to see the theme this year, which is, again, celebrating a world of flavors, because my undergraduate degree was actually in Spanish and history. And so I spent a lot of time studying cultures and realized that kind of the center of a lot of cultures is circled around the table, learning about food. And, you know, that's as easily passed down as a recipe from your grandmother to your mother to you, for example. So that was really exciting. And I think the connection with the Blue Zones, like Becca said, is really interesting. So we'll look at the Blue Zones, where we'll look at how culture and food and healthy aging all intersect together. So what are the Blue Zones? They're kind of a funny name, but these are 5 distinct locations across the world in Loma Linda, California, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Sardinia, Italy, Ikara, Greece, and Okinawa, Japan. And these are 5 distinct locations that have a high concentration of centenarians. And a centenarian is someone that lives to be at least 100 years old. And so these cultures, despite being spread out over the globe, they all have these people that are living not only to 100 or older, but living well, that have a high functionality in their life and are happy, which is not what you normally would think of somebody at that age. So with the Blue Zones, we have research from the National Institute on Aging and National Geographic that have really looked at what is the commonality between these Blue Zone areas and why their cultural traditions and customs and dietary habits have allowed them to live so long. So over time, we know that dietary patterns have kind of shifted from the industrialization of food production and agriculture. And even though there's been a global shift towards processed foods, kind of beginning in the 1950s and 60s, many Blue Zone cultures have really stuck with the traditional ways of shepherding and traditional agriculture practices. And these have really influenced their dietary patterns over time. And because we know the Blue Zone inhabitants are likely to live longer, have a higher quality of life, and reduction in chronic diseases, a lot of research has gone into these zones. Oops. So I wanted to read you a quote from Dan Buttner, and he is the lead researcher with National Geographic, and he's really kicked off all of the research into the Blue Zones, which says, "The calculus of aging offers us two options. We can live a shorter life with more years of disability, or we can live the longest life possible with the fewest bad years. As my centenarian friend showed me, the choice is largely up to us." And this quote is based on Dan's experience with Blue Zone people in his research. And it's also based on the Danish twin study, which established that only about 20% of how long the average person lives is dictated by genes, while the other 80% is dictated by lifestyle. So aging doesn't have to be associated with disability and mental decay. And we're going to dig into some of this research and see what we found from this. So with the Blue Zone research, it kind of all began in 2004. National Geographic, led by Dan Buttner and his team of demographers, epidemiologists, researchers, and anthropologists with the National Aging Institute, focused on these 5 zones that had people reaching an age of 100 at 10 times greater rate than in the United States. And they kind of came up with 9 themes or evidence-based lifestyle commonalities that they call the Power 9 that kind of are common across all 5 zones. So despite having vastly different cultures and traditions and lifestyles, there are some commonalities that have come out of this, which we'll look into. And over the years, there have been 5 books written on the Blue Zones and numerous research articles published out there that you can find, trying to just figure out the secret of aging. So we're going to dig into that today. And I should mention, there is more recent research on the Blue Zones, looking at, of course, data with our diet, our healthy habits and psychosocial factors, and looking at our environmental exposure to different toxins. And still, we're seeing research that shows about 50% of our lifespan is contributed to these lifestyle factors, while about 25% of that is genetic. So let's take a look at these specific lifestyle factors that we found with the Blue Zones. And the first one is to move naturally. So the inhabitants of the Blue Zones have found ways within their lifestyle to nudge them towards movement throughout the day. And whether that's through gardening or labor-intensive housework or yard work, or even just walking around to get to places to get things that they need, they are always moving throughout the day. The second one is purpose. So knowing your sense of purpose has been shown in the research to be worth up to 7 years of extra life expectancy. And I know, at least for me, when I was younger, kind of going through those moments in life, wondering, what am I doing? What is my purpose in life? That can be a little bit depressing and, well, kind of frustrating. So knowing your sense of purpose has shown to really elongate your life. The third one is routines to shed stress. So we know that stress, short-term stress can happen, but long-term stress over time, which is pretty common these days, especially with our lifestyles the way they are, this chronic stress can lead to chronic inflammation, and that can lead to alterations in our metabolism. That kind of puts us at more likelihood of these chronic diseases. So Blue Zone inhabitants have found ways to reduce stress. So for example, the Okinawans spend time every single day reflecting on their ancestors. The Seventh-day Adventists in California, they take time to pray every day. The the Sardinians in Greece take naps and they also enjoy happy hour in some of those other blue zone areas. So they take time every day to de-stress, which is really important for overall health. The fourth one is the 80% rule. And this kind of comes from the Okinawans. They follow this Confucian mantra that says to stop eating when your stomach is about 80% full. And they also, most of the blue zones eat their largest meal at kind of lunchtime or late afternoon rather than end of the day. And really for me, what I take away from that is listening to your internal hunger and fullness cues and really understanding when you feel satisfied rather than eating till you feel really full and uncomfortable. And then the fifth one, we're going to dig into this a lot more in the next part of the presentation, but it's more of a plant slant, so a diet focused more on plant foods. So we'll go into that in a little bit. The sixth one is wine at 5. So the people in the blue zones, except for the Seventh-day Adventists in California, all drink wine in moderation, and they enjoy that with friends and food, so they enjoy it socially. So just another community connection there. We're not recommending that you drink wine if you don't already drink it, but that is something that we found in common amongst the blue zones. And then the seventh is a sense of belonging. So most of them do belong to some kind of a faith community that help them have that sense of a higher purpose in life. And the eighth is loved ones first. And many keep their aging family members either nearby or in their home. And research shows that having your elderly loved ones in your home lowers disease risk and mortality rates for the children who live in that home. As well, for loved ones, they commit to a life partner and really invest in their children with time and love. And the final Power 9 commonality is right tribe. So they choose or were born into social circles that support healthy behaviors. So I know in Okinawa, they have this moya, and it's this little close circle of friends that they grow up with and spend time with daily or weekly that they really learn to count on. So we're going to dig into some more specific data on the food guidelines that we've come up with from research in the blue zones, but I just wanted to point out that the dietary guidelines to the blue zones make only one part of this commonality of 9 lifestyle factors. So just taking the dietary advice is helpful. However, it's important to note that all of these other factors we just talked about go hand in hand to work together towards creating that longer, healthy life. So all the research done on the blue zones has kind of distilled 11 different food guidelines. And it's not a diet or anything like that, but it's just commonalities that we've come up with in the research that despite different food traditions and cultures, these are common themes that come up with each and every blue zone area. So we're going to dive into each one. We'll talk about what the guideline is and what the nutritional benefit may be towards helping them live to that amazing age. So the first one is plant slant. So plant-centered diet, it's going to focus on locally grown fruits and vegetables, olive oil or other vegetable oils, beans and grains. And they also consume small portions of meat, mostly from local herds, about once a week. And then they take their extra produce and dry it or pickle it or even jar it for off-season consumption, meaning they're getting these fruits and vegetables all year round, no matter the season. And these are full of fiber, which can help lower blood cholesterol levels. They can feed the gut bacteria that supports healthy digestion and also supports immune function. And then they also, the fiber from these plant foods provide that sense of fullness. So instead of feeling like you can just keep eating things, you actually feel satisfied at the end of the meal, helping you keep from overeating. And then these are going to be full of vitamins and minerals. We'll talk more about this later, but vitamins and minerals can help with cell repair, cancer prevention, and support overall metabolism. So the next one is mini doses of meat. So I mentioned that they eat meat, but not not that frequently. And the average consumption is about 2 ounces. So if you think about half the deck of cards is the size, if you think about the last time you had meat, it probably was nowhere near that small, but the portion size is tiny. And they do that about 5 times a month, or about a day or so a week. And the Seventh-day Adventist, a Blue Zone group in Loma Linda, with their religious beliefs, they do not consume any meat. And research has shown that their plant-based diet has helped them live longer. And then the Okinawans typically substitute some of their meat eating with tofu. And tofu is a hearty meat alternative that still provides all the protein that they need. And we do know that meat is a great source of protein. It's also a great source of iron that is absorbed readily in the body. And then it also provides saturated fat, which some saturated fat can be good for us in moderation and help us feel nice and full at the end of the meal. So the third one is the middle of the food chain, fish, which is a mouthful, but they actually eat fish less than 3 ounces, so not a huge serving size again, up to 3 times a week. So they eat fish pretty frequently. This kind of falls in line with that Mediterranean style dietary pattern. And they choose middle of the food chain species like anchovies, sardines, or cod. And these are less expensive. They're also lower in mercury content than some of those bigger fish that are higher up in the food chain. And then they're more accessible. There's a lot more of these fish out there. And fish are really important because they provide omega-3 fatty acids. And these are fatty acids that are anti-inflammatory. So we talked about how chronic stress and certain disease state can kind of cause that low level inflammation. So fish are really helpful in that they can reduce that inflammation in the body. They also are a great source of protein, as well as vitamin D and vitamin B2. So having fish about 3 times a week is definitely one of the keys to longer living. And then the fourth one is fermented dairy, which is definitely a favorite of mine. I love my cheese. I used to actually be a cheese buyer. Little fun fact of my background, but most of their dairy actually comes from, not from cows, but their local goat or sheep's milk. And it's fermented into yogurt, sour milk, or aged cheese. And the benefit of fermented dairy is that you allow these beneficial bacteria or probiotics to thrive in the dairy product. And then when you eat that, it actually thrives in your gut and supports digestion and healthy immune system. And if you're thinking, well, for me, dairy doesn't work, I can't eat dairy because of the lactose, you can still eat fermented dairy if it is kefir, which is that sippable yogurt. And not only do the bacteria kind of ferment the milk in kefir, but they ferment the lactose. So they break that down for you. So if your problem is that you can't digest lactose, then kefir can do that for you. So you can still choose that in your diet. Okay, so the fifth one is going to be eggs in moderation. So all the Blue Zones consume eggs, but only 2 to 4 times a week, so maybe every other day. And eggs are used more of a side or as a topping, just like meat is used that way. And this is a great opportunity to kind of debunk the egg myth. So a lot of times we've heard that eggs are bad for you, they have a lot of cholesterol, so they raise your body's cholesterol. But that's actually not true. Eggs are shown to increase the good cholesterol, which is HDL cholesterol in the body. So that's actually a benefit. And we know that cholesterol in the diet is not really what raises blood cholesterol, but actually refined grains. So processed foods that are low in fiber and high in sugar can actually raise cholesterol. But eggs have, as you can see in this picture, a ton of different vitamins and minerals. So they're actually a great source of protein and these other vitamins and minerals in the diet. All right, enough ranting on eggs. So beans every day. Beans are the backbone of the Blue Zone dietary pattern. And a lot of these consist of pulses. And pulses are the edible seeds of the legume family. And they include beans, peas, and lentils, including chickpeas as well. And most inhabitants consume about a half cup of cooked beans every day. And beans are great because they provide protein, they provide fiber, vitamins, and minerals, they're actually part of both the vegetable group and the protein group. So you kind of get 2 for 1 there. And the crop is really great for the environment because beans are drought tolerant. They use a lot less water to grow, and they also can replace their soil nitrogen by converting nitrogen in the air and providing that to their roots. So oftentimes you might think about beans providing some nutrients, but also some rather uncomfortable side effects like bloating and gas. So my recommendation there is to swap with smaller amounts. So you can see some of these swap tips here, like replacing half of the meat in tacos or lasagna, for example, with beans or lentils, and focus on smaller portions when you do that. Also, it can help to drink a good amount of water because beans are pretty high in fiber. They're going to pull water into your digestive tract, and so you need to replace that water. So try doing smaller portions to start. And then natural sugar. So our blue zone inhabitants include natural sugars. That means naturally found in the fruit or vegetable, also found in milk and honey. And they also enjoy local treats. So they do savor those for special occasions and social gathering. But these are sugars that live naturally in the food, like the pear you see in the picture, rather than being added during processing, like these pancakes or some kind of sugar, maple syrup substitutes. That's not actually maple sugar. And most forms of natural sugar, excluding the milk and honey example, they provide fiber and protein. So we know that fiber and protein in the fruit can help us regulate blood sugar. So when we eat this whole pear, we get fiber, maybe a tiny bit of protein there. And when we do so, it slows down our digestion of the sugar in the pear. Instead of spiking our blood sugar, we get more of a gradual release. And that's really important in the prevention of diabetes. All right, so the 8th one found among the blue zones is that they all consume various nuts. And we found that 2 handfuls of nuts a day can help reduce blood cholesterol. And they're also full of heart-healthy unsaturated fats that help us feel nice and full for a longer period of time. They're also full of protein, vitamins, and minerals. So try to add some nuts to your diet if you don't already do so. And then sourdough bread. So if you started making sourdough during the pandemic, keep it going. Communities in the blue zone use fermented sourdough starter cultures with 100% whole grain. And these whole grains provide that fiber we've talked about, as well as protein and other minerals. And they also provide probiotics. So because sourdough is fermented, it has those bacterial cultures that can live in your gut. And the 10th is whole food. This kind of goes along with the whole sugars, but the idea is that they choose locally harvested whole foods with minimal additives or chemicals. So instead of taking out the yolk to make an egg white omelet, they'll keep the whole egg in there. They consume whole fruits and vegetables rather than peeling them and removing the skin, which we know would take out the fiber. You can see the example with the orange juice. So 100% orange juice, even though it is orange juice from the fruit, it's natural, we've taken out the fiber. So to make that full 8 ounces is actually going to be 21 grams of sugar and only half of a gram of fiber. Whereas if you eat 1 whole orange, you'll get 13 grams of natural sugar from the orange as well, but you get that 3 grams of fiber. So if you think about if you ate maybe 3 oranges to make that 8 ounces of orange juice, that you'd feel really full, and that's because you're getting that fiber. And then they use preservation methods like canning or pickling rather than adding additives to extend shelf life. So I also wanted to point out that you can still eat whole foods on a budget. You can use canned or frozen fruits and vegetables to do this. You just want to make sure to look at the ingredients and the nutrition facts panel on the back and make sure there aren't any added salts or sugars to those, but they can be a great choice to include in your budget. And then the final commonality for food guidelines is drinking water. So they all focus on drinking water, tea, and coffee. And then 4 out of the 5 zones drink red wine socially, and they avoid soda consumption. We know that soda adds a lot of added sugar to the diet, so that's something that you don't find in blue zones. So when we drink tea, coffee, and red wine, we're drinking a lot of antioxidants as well. And these decrease oxidative stress in the body and help prevent disease and help you age a little better. So if you don't already drink coffee or red wine, that's okay. You can focus on green tea, which has a lot of those antioxidants. Okay, so that was a lot of information on the blue zones. Let's kind of bring it together. So we learned from these food guidelines that they help us understand a healthful dietary pattern can come from many cultures within many food traditions. So we're going to take these guidelines and see how we can bring them together for everyday food decisions. And we can do that by looking at MyPlate. And some of you might be familiar with MyPlate, but it's the idea of making every single bite count towards a more optimal health and reducing your risk of chronic disease. And we'll go through how MyPlate kind of does this, but you want to imagine this plate being each and every meal, and half of the plate is going to be filled with fruits and vegetables. And this is really important. You can see in the slide how colorful it is. And we say to eat the rainbow because fruits and vegetables with various colors represent different vitamins and minerals in those fruits and veggies. An example is like dark leafy greens like kale and broccoli, spinach, things like that. They're full of vitamin K, and vitamin K helps us with our blood clotting and our bone health. Whereas some of our bright orange and yellow fruits and vegetables like squash and bell peppers, they're full of beta carotene, and that can support our night vision. So if we eat the rainbow, we'll make sure we get all these different vitamins and minerals to support all these different metabolic processes in the body. So you don't have to get all the colors in one day, but you can try to choose throughout the week getting different colors in your diet. So we also remember that having half our plate being fruits and vegetables is going to increase our fiber in our diet. And most of us don't get enough fiber. So we want to make sure as we're switching towards adding fruits and veggies that we're also drinking a lot of water as we increase the fiber in the diet. So a quarter of the plate is also going to be full of whole grains. And whole grains have a lot of that fiber as well as vitamins and minerals. And some examples would be 100% whole grain bread, which you can check for on the back of the package, or you can make that sourdough we talked about. You can get corn tortillas, quinoa, brown rice, oats. Those are some other examples. What is not a whole grain is going to be the refined grains, like white bread and white rice, white flour tortillas. And those have removed the fiber and a lot of the vitamins and minerals. Some of them are added back in, but not to the extent that you find in the whole grain product. And then the last quarter of the plate is going to be lean protein. And these can be like chicken and turkey and leaner cuts of red meat. You can also get those plant protein sources we talked about, like beans or soy is a great one, as well as nuts. These add more fiber along with the protein. And then Greek yogurt is another great example with your dairy that gives you both healthy fats and proteins, but Greek yogurt is strained, so it's even more concentrated, so you get even more protein from it. So what we want to avoid with our meat sources, our protein, is our processed meats, such as salami, deli meats, things like that. They're usually higher in sugar and very high in added salt and nitrates or nitrites. And this is so that it can stay fresh for longer, but these are going to be harmful over time if we eat a lot of these products, especially in consideration of some of these chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes. So oftentimes with MyPlate, these examples of a healthy diet are not necessarily representative of other cultural foods or traditions. And what I mean is this example of this American plate, which you can see is kind of dry. It's kind of your classic American food. And while it is helpful to see how we can make the plate half fruits and veggies, a quarter of grains and protein, it doesn't really show us how MyPlate can fit with other cultural traditions. So that's why, with today's theme of celebrating a world of flavors for National Nutrition Month, we wanted to be sure to show you how MyPlate can really be incorporated with any cultural food or tradition. And I think these are great visually to see because it gives us the flexibility as well to follow our food cravings. Maybe you're craving something from more of a Latin style. Maybe you have your favorite recipe and you want to see how you can include it in MyPlate. Or maybe there's certain celebrations where you eat certain foods and you can just see how you can still eat those foods that you enjoy, but incorporate them within a MyPlate template to be sure that you're getting all those healthful vitamins and minerals and fibers and things like that. So by eating this varied diet, this MyPlate style, we can help prevent chronic diseases like high blood pressure and diabetes. And we know that this is something that we suffer from across the globe, across traditions, across cultures. So the longer we can prevent, or the better we can manage these chronic diseases through our diet, as well as those lifestyle factors we talked about, then the longer we can live a high quality life, just like those centenarians in the blue zones. So thinking back to National Nutrition Month, after we've learned about somebody's eating habits, their cultural traditions and dietary preferences, and then we provided some of this basic education, what we next want to do is consult with them about some goals specific to their nutrition and their lifestyle. So, get some water. Before you set any kind of a goal, whether it's a nutrition related goal or a physical activity goal or a work goal, it's good to reflect on kind of where you are and what you want out of these goals. So some things to think about is what motivates you. How might your life be different if you were to make this change, maybe better? And then how are you going to do it? What are some of the barriers to the change that might make it difficult to stick with? Oftentimes with nutrition goal making, it's like time, it's cost, and it's access to healthy foods. So when you're setting a goal, you want to think of ways that you can work around these barriers. So if it feels like you're ready to make a nutrition goal, what we want to do is make it a SMART goal. And that is a goal that is specific. So what do you want to do? And measurable. How will you know when you've reached it? Is it achievable? Is it in your power to accomplish it? Is it realistic? Can you realistically achieve this goal? Maybe not shooting for the moon. And is it timely? When exactly do you want to accomplish it? So I'm going to give you some examples here. So oftentimes with nutrition goal setting, the client will say, well, I'll eat more fruits and vegetables. But setting a vague, broad goal is going to be really hard to stick with. It's kind of like putting a sticky note on maybe in your bathroom mirror and saying, oh yeah, I did say I was going to do that, and then kind of forgetting about it the rest of the day. So what we want to do is make that goal SMART. So what we can do is maybe I'll say I'll add more vegetables like carrots and cucumbers and bell peppers with hummus to my lunch, and I'll bring it in 5 days a week at work. And this way I'll feel more energetic and more satisfied after lunch. And barriers for me are going to be time. So to mitigate this, when I go buy my vegetables on the weekend, I'll make sure to go ahead and chop them up and put them in containers in the refrigerator so that I can just grab them and go. So another example would be, okay, breakfast is hard for me. Maybe I want to add a vegetable and a fruit at breakfast. So let's make that a SMART goal. So I'll make breakfast smoothies with a fruit and a vegetable 3 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And because life is hectic and mornings are hard as it is, I can put these ingredients in a Ziploc bag and put them in the freezer so that in the morning, all I have to do is dump it in the blender and add the liquid and I'm ready. Or if I really think that's too hard, I'll make my smoothie the night before and put it in my to-go bottle and put it in the fridge. And that way I just grab it and run out the door. So this will help me feel more energized in the morning. It will help me from getting so hangry mid-morning before lunch, and it will help me from eating past my fullness later in the day. So those are some reasons why I really want to do this goal. And because I'm on a budget, because I'm in school, I can look to buy frozen fruits and vegetables, and that will be a little bit less expensive. So these are just a couple examples of SMART goals. What's really important to remember is that these goals should be specific to you. So not everybody's goal is going to look the same. All right, so to wrap it up, I hope that you were able to learn how food traditions can fit into a healthy diet and reduce chronic disease risk, as well as increase your healthy aging, your quality of life as you age. Food traditions can and should be incorporated into a healthy dietary pattern. So my hope is that you can honor your cultural food traditions or your favorite recipes while still caring for your physical health. Lastly, I hope that you can see how a registered dietitian can be beneficial to your health and your nutrition goals. And I hope that you can consider meeting with a dietitian to help you on your health journey. So I've got some references here, and then I'd like to say thank you. And we'd love to take some of these questions that have come up.
Awesome. Thanks, Kara. That was such great content. Thanks for packing it in. So I have a couple questions. If you were to do a Pinterest search for recipes, would Whole30 be a good search term, or do you have a different recommendation for what someone could search for?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I actually haven't searched for recipes on Pinterest, but with Whole30, I think it really depends on what your specific goal is. I know with Whole30, the focus is on eating whole foods, and that is an important concept we've learned from the Blue Zones, to focus on eating whole foods. However, I think that can get a little bit expensive for some people. So I don't know, for me personally, when I look for recipes, I'm just more inspired by what I'm craving or what I'm looking for with foods that I've already purchased at the store. So I think it really just depends on kind of how you approach your food shopping or your recipe inspiration. But looking at Whole30 definitely could be helpful for some of you, depending on what your goal is. When you look at a recipe, think about how it fits in your lifestyle. Does it have 20 ingredients and just feel really overwhelming and you have to go buy all these different things? I often try to look for a recipe that's pretty simple. And depending on your level of cooking, you know, if it's something that's really complicated and takes a lot of time, that might be a barrier to you. And then just take advantage of your resources. You know, if you have an Instant Pot that can save you some time, maybe try that. If you have a lot of things going on in life, maybe looking for a one-pot recipe is more appropriate. So I think it's going to be really individual when you're looking for different recipes.
Do you have any places that you like to go for recipes? Like any recommended, I don't know, websites or
I think a favorite I actually follow through Instagram is Half Baked Harvest, and she actually lives over in Colorado. But she has a lot of fun recipes that most of them are pretty healthy too, I've noticed, but they're just really fun and beautiful. And she also has great step-by-step either videos or instructions. And every single one that I've tried has been delicious. So I know I can trust her recipes.
I'm with you there. I like following her. And if anyone has great recipes or sources, feel free to type those in the chat. I'm sure other people would like to learn about that too. Okay, so I have another question. We can maybe fit one or two more and then we'll wrap up. It says with this, is the portion size as important as in other nutrition programs? I think that's referring to Whole30. So maybe just talking about portion sizes a little bit. Your MyPlate kind of addressed that. But would you mind just recapping on your thoughts on portion sizes?
My thought too is it could have to do, we talked a little bit about some of the meat portion sizes being pretty small, that 2.5 ounces. And with portion size in general, when you think about MyPlate, if you're gonna fill half of your plate with fruits and veggies and you leave some space for grains and protein, that is gonna kind of restrict how big your portion size is. But something that way just kind of glazed over was thinking about that 80% rule with the Okinawan people in Japan. Just thinking about understanding when you are starting to feel full and satisfied can be helpful with portion size. That's something that a lot of us kind of when we're eating quickly and distracted, we kind of forget to check in with ourselves. So portion size is not going to be a cookie cutter for every person because we all have different needs depending on our own bodies, as well as our activity and just our stage in life. So it's hard to kind of narrow down on a specific portion size, but I think MyPlate will help you kind of fit those fruits and vegetables, grains and proteins so that you're getting all the things that you need. And then the idea with the blue zones, with the meat specifically, is to treat it more as a side dish to your meal or a topping, focusing on those other healthy aspects that we talked about instead of making meat the focus, which is pretty common in most American diets, is having your meat and a few things on the side. So just kind of swapping that.
Awesome. If I can add to that too on the portion size comment, just to jump off of what you were mentioning with like kind of listening to your own body and trying to be respectful of hunger, it'll even differ within a person, right? On like the day and what's going on. So even it varies between individuals, but then within an individual too. And for me, portion size is almost a red flag because it's an external cue on what you should be eating, right? So it's like, okay, this thing says, the nutrition serving says that it's 16 crackers. And so that's what I'll give myself, or a number of diets would also direct that. And that's an externally driven cue that has no recognition of your own personal needs. So what we're really hoping to do as dietitians is help people connect with their own internal signals of fullness and hunger and try to be more responsive to that. Okay, one more question, and then I think that we're at time. So if someone is not like a huge bean fan, and that's a big part of a plant-based protein intake, do you have any recommendations for different ways to integrate that? I know that you had that little box on the plant slant that gave some options of trying to incorporate more of those. But for someone, I don't know if it's just gradually increasing beans or if you have a different recommendation on how to approach that if they're not, if they've been more adverse to it or have like some symptoms around bean intake.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is going to kind of depend on whether it's just something that you don't really enjoy eating or if you have kind of some symptoms that go along with it. I would say if beans are something that you haven't traditionally enjoyed, be a little open-minded. There are a ton of recipes out there, especially with lentils, for example. They can kind of be thrown into soups and sauces because they're really soft. They can be blended. So that can be something that you don't even realize it's there. As well as I mentioned that smart goal with vegetables with hummus. And hummus is still a bean. You have those chickpeas, and that can be a really nice snack to eat. And you kind of forget that is actually a bean. So there are a lot of different recipes that use beans that the bean is kind of in there. It's not the center focus that you can enjoy. I would say if you're having some like digestive issues with beans, then small portions would be kind of spread out throughout the day would be better than eating like a big portion of beans, and making sure you're getting plenty of water with that. Another option, if you can tolerate soy, like tofu, or if you have soy milk you can use in a smoothie, those are some good ways to still benefit from the protein in soy, but maybe not having to deal with as much of the side effect or the taste. So I don't know if that fully answers your question. That's kind of tricky because a lot of this you'll notice really depends on the individual. And that's the great thing about nutrition is it's very individualized. So if you were to think of meeting with a registered dietitian, that's the goal, is to really make our recommendations and what we can help you with very individual to your needs and your goals.
I think that's a great answer, Kara. And I was too just thinking as you were talking, you had included the plant-based flours also as a way to incorporate that, substituting with baked goods, which is a good tip that I want to try.
Yes.
Well, thanks again for all the education and content that you shared with us. I hope that everyone who joined learned something. And with that, we'll wrap it up.
All right. Thank you.
Happy end of National Nutrition Month.
Yes. Thank
Thanks,
you all.
Karen.